Jalil walked down the busy street, his eyes wandering from one shop to another. The afternoon sun was hot, and he could feel sweat forming on his forehead. He wiped it with the back of his hand and looked around. The streets were full of people. Some were rushing to work, some were chatting with friends, and some were carrying bags of groceries. The city always felt alive, full of movement and sound. He liked walking here because it was noisy, colorful, and full of life. He could hear car horns, children laughing, and the distant music from a street performer. His stomach gave a loud rumble and he frowned. He had skipped lunch because of his morning classes. Now all he could think about was food. His mouth watered as he imagined something warm and tasty. Just then the smell of grilled meat reached his nose. It was rich and smoky, mixed with the aroma of garlic sauce and soft bread. Jalil stopped in his tracks. He knew exactly what it was: shawarma. Across the road there was a small shawarma stand. The metal spit rotated slowly, golden meat turning on it, releasing a smell that made Jalil's mouth water even more. The sunlight reflected off the metal, making the stand look clean and bright. The vendor, a middle-aged man wearing a white apron, was slicing meat carefully and wrapping it in warm bread. He moved quickly, but there was a carefulness in his hands, like he was proud of his work. Jalil's steps slowed as he approached the stand. He could feel his excitement growing. He had eaten shawarma before, but there was something about street food that felt different. It smelled fresh, hot, and full of flavor. He could imagine biting into it. The crispiness of the bread, the tender meat, the soft vegetables, and the creamy sauce all mixed together. Just thinking about it made his stomach growl again. As he reached out to take his wallet from his pocket, a sudden voice stopped him. "Wait." Jalil turned quickly and saw a girl running toward him. She looked young, maybe about his age. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple braid, and her eyes were wide with worry. She was dressed in a light dress that moved with the wind as she ran. Her shoes tapped quickly against the pavement. "Don't eat that," she said, almost out of breath. "Please don't eat it." Jalil blinked at her, surprised. He didn't know her. He took a step back, holding the shawarma in his mind but stopping his hand. "Why not?" he asked, trying to sound calm even though he was curious and slightly irritated. The girl, whose name he would soon learn was Binta, stopped a few steps away and took a deep breath. She looked around nervously as if she was afraid someone might overhear. I just saw something," she said, her voice trembling a little. "Something is wrong with the meat. It's not safe. Please just don't eat it." Jalil frowned. He looked at the shawarma stand again. Everything seemed normal. The meat was turning golden, the vendor was moving carefully, and the bread looked fresh. Nothing seemed wrong. "Are you sure?" he asked. "It looks fine to me." Binta nodded quickly. "I know it looks fine. But I saw the delivery truck earlier. I saw the meat inside. It didn't look right. I think it's bad." Her voice was full of fear but also urgency. She stepped closer and grabbed his arm gently. "Please, don't eat it. I just don't want anything bad to happen to you." Jalil was confused. He had always been careful about food. He usually washed his hands before eating and avoided street food if it looked dirty. But this stand always seemed clean and he had eaten here before. He thought about the warmth of the bread, the smell of the meat, and the sound of it sizzling on the spit. It was tempting. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him again of his hunger. He looked at Binta's worried face and felt a strange sense of responsibility. He didn't know her, but he could see the concern in her eyes. He wondered why she was so worried about a stranger. Most people wouldn't care. He realized that maybe it was better to listen just in case. He stepped back and folded his arms. "Okay," he said slowly. "I won't eat it. But what makes you so sure it's bad?" Binta looked relieved. She smiled slightly, though it was still nervous. I don't want to get into trouble, but I saw the delivery. It looked like the meat had been sitting in the sun for too long. And I know it sounds strange, but I've heard reports about food poisoning from this batch before. Please, Jalil, just wait." Jalil's curiosity grew. He had never thought about how dangerous street food could be. He usually trusted his instincts and the way food smelled. But now he realized there was more to it. There were risks he hadn't considered. Maybe Binta was right. Maybe this was one of those times when hunger could make him careless. He glanced at the shawarma again. It looked so tempting. The bread was warm, the meat was sizzling, and the sauce was glistening. He could imagine taking a bite and feeling the taste explode in his mouth. His mouth watered just thinking about it. But then he looked at Binta again. Her eyes were earnest, full of concern, and he felt a strange sense of caution rising in him. He thought about the times he had ignored warnings before. He remembered getting sick once from a street snack he had thought was safe. The memory made him shiver. Maybe it was better to be careful this time. Maybe it was better to listen to someone who cared, even if he didn't know her. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "I won't eat it. But I need to know, how did you know?" Binta sighed and looked down at her feet. "I was walking by earlier and I saw the delivery. The truck had no proper cooling and the meat looked strange. I didn't know who to tell, but I didn't want anyone to get sick. You were about to eat it and I had to say something." Jalil felt a mixture of gratitude and relief. He was glad he had stopped. He realized how easy it was to give in to temptation and ignore warnings. His hunger had almost led him into danger, but Binta's quick action had saved him from a potential mistake. The street around them continued to buzz with noise and movement. People walked past, some laughing, some rushing. The shawarma vendor continued to slice meat and wrap it in bread, unaware of the small drama unfolding across the road. Jalil looked at the stand, then back at Binta and finally smiled slightly. "Thank you," he said. "You probably just saved me from getting really sick." Binta smiled back a little shyly. "I'm glad," she said. I don't like seeing people get hurt if it can be avoided." Jalil nodded. He felt a strange sense of respect for her. She had cared enough to speak up, even for someone she didn't know. It made him realize that sometimes, strangers could make the biggest difference. He looked at the street again, at the vendors, the people, and the bright sun. His hunger hadn't disappeared, but he felt a new sense of awareness. He realized that enjoying food wasn't just about taste, it was also about safety. He made a mental note to be more careful in the future. For a moment he thought about what he would do next. Maybe he would go to a cafe nearby. Maybe he would wait until he got home. But one thing was certain. He would never forget this moment, when hunger almost made him make a mistake, and a stranger's courage had stopped him. He took a deep breath, feeling the warm air of the city around him. The smells, the sounds, and the movement all seemed brighter now. He smiled at Binta again. "Let's go get something safe to eat," he said. "Wait." Binta called again, her voice louder this time. Jalil turned quickly, startled. He hadn't expected anyone to shout at him on the busy street. People walking by didn't notice. They were lost in their own world, talking, laughing, or hurrying along. But Binta ran toward him, her steps quick, almost urgent. Her eyes were wide, and there was a mix of fear and insistence in her expression. Jalil frowned. He didn't know this girl. He had never seen her before, and suddenly someone was stopping him from eating his food. His hand hesitated in the air, almost reaching for the warm shawarma. The aroma was still strong, rich, and inviting, making his stomach growl loudly. He glanced at the shawarma stand. Everything looked normal. The meat was turning golden, the bread was warm, and the vendor seemed busy but careful. "Don't eat that shawarma," Binta said again, her voice trembling slightly. "I think there's something wrong with the meat." Jalil's frown deepened. "Something wrong?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. He looked at the stand again, trying to see what she meant. The meat looked perfectly cooked. The bread was fresh. Everything seemed fine. He didn't understand why she was so worried. I saw the delivery," Binta continued, her voice a little shaky. "The truck brought the meat here earlier. It didn't look right. The meat, it wasn't fresh, and I think it could make people sick." She took a deep breath, as if trying to convince herself as much as him. "Please just wait. Don't eat it." Jalil paused. He could feel his stomach growling again. The smell was strong, and the thought of biting into the warm, juicy meat made his mouth water. But Binta's eyes were fixed on him, full of worry. Her concern was clear, almost desperate. There was something in her voice that made him stop and think. He rubbed his chin. "Are you sure?" he asked. "You don't even know me. Why would you care if I eat this shawarma or not?" Binta looked down for a moment, then back at him. I don't like seeing someone get hurt if I can help it," she said softly. "I know it sounds strange, but I had to say something. Please just don't eat it." Jalil felt a strange mix of curiosity and caution. He had always been careful about food. He washed his hands before meals and avoided street food if it looked dirty. But he also loved trying new things, and the smell of the shawarma was almost impossible to resist. His stomach growled again, louder this time, reminding him of his hunger. He glanced at Binta. She looked nervous but determined. She wasn't being dramatic. She seemed genuinely worried. He wondered how she knew about the meat. Maybe she worked at the stand, or maybe she had seen something unusual. The thought made him pause. "Look," he said finally, "I've eaten here before. It looks fine to me. I think it's probably okay." Binta shook her head quickly. "No. You don't understand. I saw the truck deliver the meat. It was hot and the meat was sitting there. I think it's already starting to go bad. People could get sick. You have to believe me. Jaleel's curiosity grew. He looked at the stand carefully, trying to see what she meant. The vendor was moving quickly, wrapping shawarma after shawarma. The metal spit turned slowly, the meat glistening in the sunlight. Nothing seemed wrong, yet Binta's warning made him uneasy. He remembered a time when he had eaten street food without thinking and had gotten a bad stomachache. The memory made him shiver. Maybe Binta was right. Maybe this was one of those times when something looked fine but was actually dangerous. Okay, he said slowly. Let's say I believe you. What exactly did you see? Binta took a deep breath. I was walking by this morning before school. I saw the delivery truck stop here. The meat was stacked in boxes in the back. There was no cooling, no ice, nothing to keep it cold. It was just sitting there in the sun. I know it sounds small, but it was enough to worry me. Jaleel's frown deepened. He could imagine the boxes of meat in the hot sun, the juices starting to spoil. The thought made his stomach turn slightly. He felt a wave of relief that he hadn't taken a bite yet. And there's more, Binta said quickly, noticing his hesitation. I heard from some people that a few others have already gotten sick from meat delivered in that same truck this week. I didn't know it would be here so soon, but I saw it and I knew someone would try to eat it. That's why I ran to stop you. Jaleel stared at her for a moment. Her words painted a picture in his mind. He could see the hot truck, the meat sitting uncovered, the possibility of illness. The delicious smell of the shawarma suddenly didn't seem as appealing. His hunger battled with a new feeling of caution. He rubbed his stomach and took a deep breath. I'm glad you stopped me, he said finally. I probably would have eaten it without thinking. Binta nodded, looking relieved. I didn't want to scare you or anything. I felt like someone needed to know before it was too late. Jaleel looked around at the street. The sun was still bright, people were still rushing past, and the vendor was busy serving others. Everything looked normal, but now he knew there was more to the story. Things weren't always as they seemed. He realized that the smell of food, the appearance of freshness, and the temptation of hunger could make people ignore danger. He felt a strange sense of respect for Binta. She had cared enough to speak up, even for a stranger. Most people wouldn't have bothered. Some would have just ignored it, but she had taken the time to warn him. That was something he hadn't expected. Thank you, he said again. You might have just saved me from getting really sick. Binta smiled slightly, a mix of relief and shyness in her expression. I'm glad, she said. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. Jaleel glanced back at the shawarma stand. The golden meat, the warm bread, the creamy sauce, it all looked tempting still. But he didn't feel the same pull anymore. He felt cautious, aware, and thankful. He realized that sometimes it wasn't about how good something smelled or how hungry you were. Sometimes it was about stopping, thinking, and listening. Maybe I'll get something from a cafe nearby, he said. Safer food, at least for now. Binta nodded. Good idea. There's a place just down the street. It's clean and the food is fresh. You won't get sick there. As they walked together, Jaleel felt a strange sense of calm. The street was still busy, still noisy, but it didn't feel overwhelming. The warning, the fear of danger, and the relief of avoiding it all mixed together, creating a strange but comforting feeling inside him. He realized that the moment had changed him, even if just a little. Hunger and temptation had almost made him careless, but awareness and caution had saved him. And sometimes help came from the most unexpected places, like a stranger who cared enough to speak up. Jaleel looked at Binta again. You really didn't have to run after me, he said. I appreciate it. She smiled softly. I wanted to. I just couldn't let anyone eat that meat. They continued walking, leaving the busy shawarma stand behind. Jaleel's stomach still grumbled, but he felt safe, aware, and grateful. And he knew he would remember this moment. A moment when someone's quick thinking and care had stopped him from making a mistake that could have been very bad. Even as he thought about the warm shawarma he wasn't going to eat, Jaleel felt a strange sense of relief. He knew that sometimes the right choice wasn't the easiest or the most tempting one. And thanks to Binta, he had made the right choice today. Jaleel stood on the edge of the busy street, holding the warm shawarma wrap in his hands. The smell was incredible. It smelled like garlic, spices, grilled meat, and fresh bread all mixed together. His stomach growled loudly. The warmth of the wrap pressed against his fingers, almost calling him to take a bite. Every muscle in his body seemed to say, eat it. Just one bite. You deserve it. But then Binta's warning echoed in his mind. Don't eat it. The meat isn't safe. Her voice was urgent, trembling, and full of concern. Her words were strong enough to make him pause. Jalil's fingers tightened around the wrap as if holding it too long would make the temptation stronger and the warning fainter. He glanced across the street. His friend Kamau was standing near a soda shop, grinning at him. Kamau waved the fingers teasingly and shouted, "Come on, Jalil. Don't overthink it. Just eat the shawarma. You're going to miss it." Jalil's face tightened. He knew Kamau was joking, but the teasing made him feel even more confused. Kamau had always been the type to act first and think later. He would eat anything without worrying about safety, sometimes ending up sick or complaining later. Yet, the words made Jalil consider the shawarma again. The smell, the taste he imagined, the warmth, it all seemed too tempting to resist. He looked at Binta. She stood a few steps away, her arms folded, biting her lip nervously. Her eyes followed his every move. She seemed worried that he would give in to temptation. Jalil felt a strange tug-of-war inside him. On one side was his hunger, his curiosity, and the desire for something delicious. On the other side was caution, reason, and Binta's urgent warning. He closed his eyes for a moment and thought back to past experiences. He remembered a time last year when he had bought street food late at night after class. It smelled perfect just like this shawarma. But he had gotten a stomachache later that night, lying awake and regretting his decision. He remembered the pain, the nausea, and how he had wished he had listened to his instincts. That memory made him shiver. Yet the present was different. This shawarma smelled fresher, looked hotter, and was steaming in front of him. He could feel his stomach growling again louder than before. He could almost taste the garlic sauce, feel the crisp bread, and bite into the tender meat. The thought was delicious and almost overwhelming. His fingers flexed around the wrap, itching to take a bite. Binta's face appeared in his mind again. Her wide eyes, the worry etched on her face, the way she had run toward him. She had cared enough to warn a stranger. Most people would not have done that. She could have walked away, ignored it, or assumed he would figure it out himself. But she had taken action. Her concern was real, and her warning was serious. "Think, Jalil," he whispered to himself. "Is it worth it? One bite could make you sick. One bite could ruin your day or worse." He glanced at Kamau again. His friend was still teasing him, pointing at the shawarma and laughing. "Don't chicken out," Kamau shouted. "Just eat it. Life's too short." Jalil frowned. Kamau didn't understand. He was thinking about flavor, fun, and the immediate satisfaction of hunger. He wasn't thinking about consequences. Jalil felt torn. He wanted to please Kamau, not seem weak or overly cautious. Yet he also wanted to stay safe and listen to Binta. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. The shawarma smelled stronger now, the aroma wrapping around him like a warm blanket. His mind raced with thoughts of taste, of the crunch of fresh vegetables, of the spicy, creamy sauce mixing with the warm meat. His mouth watered uncontrollably. His stomach growled again, demanding action. But then he remembered Binta's urgency. "Please don't eat it," she had said. "It could make you sick." Her eyes were pleading, and he remembered the seriousness of her tone. She had seen something, and she cared enough to risk running after him in a crowded street. That mattered. Her words reminded him that sometimes danger could hide in something that looked harmless, or even delicious. Jalil took a deep breath and tried to think logically. He remembered the news report he had seen on his phone the night before. There had been reports of street food contamination in the area. People had gotten sick from eating meat that wasn't properly stored. The story had stuck in his mind because he had thought, "That won't happen to me." But now, faced with this shawarma, he realized how easy it was to ignore danger when desire was strong. He felt a tension in his chest. Hunger pulled him one way, caution pulled him the other. He wanted to act immediately, but he knew he had to pause. One wrong bite could lead to vomiting, a fever, or worse. He could feel his heart racing as he held the wrap, unsure what to do. Kamau's teasing voice cut through his thoughts again. "Come on. Don't waste time thinking. Eat it, man. You're overthinking." Jalil clenched his teeth. Kamau didn't know the whole story. Kamau wasn't aware of the delivery truck, of the potentially spoiled meat, or of Binta's warning. He was only seeing the shawarma and the temptation. Jalil realized he had to make his own choice, not one influenced by anyone else. He looked at Binta again. She seemed nervous, shifting her weight from one foot to another. Her hands were folded tightly, as if she was waiting for him to decide. Her eyes met his, and he felt a strange sense of trust forming. She had no reason to lie or exaggerate. Her fear was genuine, her concern real. Jalil took another deep breath and weighed his options. He could eat the shawarma and risk being sick. He could ignore Kamau and Binta and just go home hungry. Or he could choose safety, listen to Binta, and find another place to eat. Each choice had consequences. Each choice tugged at a different part of him: desire, friendship, reason. His mind wandered briefly to his classes. He still had assignments to finish, meetings to attend, and plans for the evening. Being sick from food now would ruin all of that. He imagined lying in bed, stomach aching, missing the things he needed to do. That image made him shiver again. His stomach growled, but this time it was different. It wasn't just hunger. It was also a reminder that he needed to think carefully, to act responsibly. The warmth and smell of the shawarma were tempting, yes, but they weren't worth risking his health. He had learned that lesson before, and he didn't want to repeat it. Kamau waved again, shouting something Jalil couldn't hear clearly over the street noise. Jalil ignored him. Kamau didn't understand the situation, and he didn't need his approval. This decision was his alone. He looked at Binta one last time. "Okay," he said finally, his voice steady. "I won't eat it. You're right. I think it's better to be safe than sorry." Binta's eyes lit up, and relief spread across her face. She smiled softly. "I'm glad," she said. "You don't know how many people ignore warnings and get sick. I just wanted to help." Jalil nodded. He felt a strange mix of relief and pride. Relief that he had avoided danger, pride that he had made a responsible choice. The shawarma still smelled amazing, but it didn't have the same power over him anymore. He looked around the street. The city was still buzzing with life. People walked past, talking, laughing, carrying bags of groceries or chatting on phones. The sun was high in the sky, warm and bright. He felt a little lighter now, knowing he had made the right choice. Kamau called again, still teasing, but Jalil didn't answer. He had made up his mind. Hunger was temporary, but health was important. One moment of patience could prevent hours of suffering. He felt a sense of calm settle over him. Binta gestured down the street. "There's a cafe nearby," she said. "The food is fresh, safe, and you won't get sick." Jalil smiled. "Lead the way," he said. As they walked together, leaving the tempting shawarma behind, he felt a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. He hadn't eaten the shawarma, but he had made the right choice. And sometimes, making the right choice felt even better than satisfying a craving. He realized that moments like this were rare. Hunger and temptation were strong, but careful thought, awareness, and listening to warnings could protect him. Binta had reminded him of that. Her courage, her concern, and her quick action had helped him make the right decision. As they moved down the street, Jalil felt his stomach still grumble, but it was quieter now. The thought of a warm, safe meal at the cafe gave him comfort. The tempting shawarma was behind him, and he felt proud that he hadn't given in. That day Jalil understood something important. Desire could be powerful, but caution, awareness, and listening to others could be stronger. Sometimes the right choice wasn't the easiest or the most satisfying in the moment, but it was the choice that mattered most in the long run. And so, Jalil walked on, grateful, alert, and aware, knowing that he had avoided a mistake that could have cost him much more than a moment of hunger. Jalil stood a few steps away from the shawarma stand, his eyes fixed carefully on the vendor as he prepared the next wrap. The afternoon sun was strong, making the metal spit glint and casting long shadows on the pavement. The street around him buzzed with life, people walking, laughing, shouting, cars honking, music from a nearby radio playing, but Jalil's attention was entirely on the shawarma. He felt a mixture of curiosity, caution, and lingering hunger. He watched the vendor slice the meat slowly. At first, everything seemed normal. The meat looked golden brown on the outside, glistening slightly with oil. But as Jalil's eyes lingered, he noticed something that made his stomach tighten. Some pieces of meat were a little off in color, not the rich golden brown he had expected. A few slices had grayish edges. They didn't look fresh, and the thought sent a small shiver down his spine. He also noticed the cutting board. It had crumbs and bits of old meat stuck to it, and it looked as though it hadn't been cleaned properly in a while. A faint smell, slightly off from the rich aroma of the cooking meat, reached his nose. Jalil's heart began to beat a little faster. He remembered Binta's warning and the moment of hesitation he had felt before. It all made sense now, her concern, her urgency, her insistence. She had seen something and had tried to prevent him from making a mistake. Jalil's mind raced. He thought about what could happen if he ate the shawarma now. He imagined stomach pain, nausea, vomiting, fever. He thought about how his day could be ruined. He thought about the discomfort of lying in bed, unable to move, and missing his classes and responsibilities. The temptation of the delicious aroma and the warm bread was strong, but the thought of illness was stronger. He pulled out his phone from his pocket and quickly searched for recent news alerts about food safety in the area. His fingers trembled slightly as he typed, eager to find proof that would confirm his suspicion. The screen lit up, and there it was. A local alert reporting that a batch of meat had been contaminated that very day. Several people had already gotten sick from eating food made with it. The report included the name of the delivery company and details about where the meat had been sold. Jalil felt a rush of relief and disbelief at the same time. The pieces fell into place. The off-color meat, the unclean cutting board, Binta's worried face, all of it pointed to one thing. He had narrowly avoided eating meat that could have made him seriously ill. A wave of gratitude washed over him, and he looked around, almost hoping to spot Binta again so he could thank her properly. The vendor was still moving quickly, wrapping another shawarma with practiced hands. Jalil noticed that the vegetables were slightly wilted and the sauces had spilled a little on the counter. Nothing seemed intentional. The vendor was busy, probably unaware of the problem. But the small signs of carelessness confirmed Jalil's fear. If he hadn't paused, if he hadn't listened, he might have been in serious trouble. Jalil's stomach growled again, but it wasn't the hunger that demanded attention this time. It was the relief of knowing he had avoided danger. He felt a strange mixture of emotions: fear, relief, gratitude, and even a little pride. He had listened to a warning, paused despite temptation, and taken a moment to check facts. That small decision might have saved him from hours of pain and discomfort, or worse. He took a deep breath and stepped back from the stand. The crowd around him was moving, oblivious to what he had just discovered. Children ran past with ice cream, street vendors called out to customers, and the city seemed alive and carefree. It was strange to think that right here, in the middle of all this normal activity, a hidden danger had been waiting. Jalil felt lucky, almost as if fate had stepped in to guide him. He thought about Binta again. Her actions made more sense now. She had seen the delivery, noticed something was wrong, and acted without hesitation. Most people wouldn't have done that. Most people would have ignored it or assumed someone else would take care of it. She had acted quickly, caring enough to warn a stranger she barely knew. Jalil felt a deep sense of gratitude. Without her, he might not have paused and he might have eaten the contaminated shawarma. He looked at the street once more, his gaze moving from the vendor to the passing crowd. The smell of the shawarma still reached him, warm and tempting, but now it no longer had power over him. He had seen the truth behind the golden brown meat and the fresh bread. It wasn't just about how something looked or smelled, it was about safety, awareness, and caution. Jalil decided to take another step back. He needed to get out of the immediate area, away from the temptation and the risk. He looked at the nearby cafe that Binta had mentioned earlier. The place was clean, tidy, and smelled faintly of fresh coffee and baked bread. That would be a safe choice. His stomach could wait a few minutes for a meal that wouldn't risk his health. As he started walking toward the cafe, he pulled out his phone again to read the alert more carefully. The report was clear: contaminated meat had been delivered that morning, and the authorities were investigating. It even mentioned the symptoms people had experienced after eating the meat: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and fever. Jalil felt a shiver run down his spine as he imagined what could have happened if he had eaten it. The thought was enough to make him quicken his pace. While walking, he thought about how easy it was to be tempted by food. Street food smelled so good, looked fresh, and seemed perfect. But appearances could be deceiving. One small decision, whether to pause, to listen, or to check facts, could mean the difference between safety and danger. He realized that being cautious didn't mean being weak or overthinking. It meant being smart. Jalil's mind wandered to his friends, especially Kamau. He imagined how Kamau would react if he knew what had almost happened. Kamau would probably laugh at first, teasing him for overthinking. But deep down, Kamau would understand the seriousness. Jalil felt a small sense of responsibility to share what he had learned. If he had learned this lesson, maybe others could too. As he approached the cafe, Jalil could feel his heartbeat slowing. The tension in his chest eased, replaced by calm and relief. He could smell the safe, fresh food, and it made him feel at ease. He knew that hunger could be satisfied safely without risking illness. He walked in, greeted by the friendly smell of baked bread and the warm hum of conversation. People chatted, laughed, and enjoyed their meals, completely unaware of the danger that had lurked just outside. He found a seat by the window and sat down, still thinking about the discovery he had just made. He looked outside at the shawarma stand one last time. The vendor was still busy serving customers, unaware of what he had almost sold. Jalil felt a strange mix of sadness and gratitude. Sadness for the people who might not have been warned in time, and gratitude for the fact that he had been lucky. He pulled out his phone again, this time to send a quick message to Binta. He wanted to thank her properly. "Thank you," he typed. "You saved me today. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't warned me." He hit send and felt a warm feeling in his chest. Small actions, even from strangers, could make a big difference. Jalil looked at the cafe menu and smiled faintly. He decided to order a sandwich, something simple but safe. As he waited, he thought about what he had learned. Life was full of temptations, from delicious food to quick decisions. But pausing, observing, and listening could protect you from mistakes. Safety was worth the wait, and awareness could be a lifesaver. He sipped some water while thinking about the street outside, the smell of the shawarma fading behind him. His stomach still rumbled lightly, but he felt secure. The warm sandwich he would eat soon would satisfy his hunger without risk. The memory of almost eating the contaminated shawarma would stay with him, a reminder of the importance of caution. When the sandwich arrived, Jalil took a small bite and felt immediate satisfaction. It was warm, fresh, and safe. He smiled to himself. Hunger was gone and relief filled him. He thought again about Binta and how brave she had been. Not many people would run after someone to warn them, especially strangers. Her courage had made all the difference. Jalil realized that day how fragile safety could be, and how small decisions could change the outcome of the day. If he had ignored Binta, if he had let Kamau's teasing sway him, he could have been very sick. Instead, he had made the right choice. As he finished his meal, he felt a sense of calm and satisfaction. The street outside continued to buzz with life, but he no longer felt anxious. He had learned a valuable lesson: pay attention, trust warnings, and prioritize safety over temptation. The experience made him feel stronger, wiser, and more aware. Jalil left the cafe feeling grateful, cautious, and ready to continue his day safely. He knew he would never forget the discovery he had made, the warning he had received, and the moment that had saved him. Jalil stepped away from the shawarma stand, feeling a strange mix of relief and lingering hunger. The street around him was busy as ever, with people walking in groups, shouting to vendors, and cars honking. But for Jalil, everything felt different now. The temptation of the warm, golden shawarma was still there in the air, but it no longer pulled him toward it. Instead, he felt calm, grateful, and oddly proud of the choice he had made. He glanced at Binta as she stayed behind for a moment, watching him walk away. Her face was a little flushed from running and from worry, but she smiled at him softly. Jalil felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He hadn't thanked her properly yet, not for the courage she had shown, not for the warning that had saved him from serious illness. He called out to her, "Thank you, Binta. Seriously. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't warned me." Binta's eyes brightened and she waved. "I'm just glad you listened. Most people wouldn't stop, but you did. That matters." Jalil smiled, feeling lighter than he had in hours. He realized that this small encounter, this brief moment of someone caring enough to speak up, had made a huge difference. It was amazing how one small act could change the outcome of a day. He thought about how easily he could have ignored her, could have given in to temptation, and how that one small decision could have resulted in hours of pain, discomfort, and regret. He continued walking down the street, his eyes scanning for a safer option to eat. Binta had mentioned a cafe nearby, one that was clean, quiet, and served fresh food. He spotted it tucked between two shops, a small place with large windows letting in sunlight, and a smell of freshly baked bread and coffee drifting onto the street. The cafe seemed calm, a stark contrast to the bustling street outside. Jalil entered the cafe, the cool air immediately soothing him. The hum of conversation and the aroma of fresh food made him feel at ease. He found a small table by the window and sat down, setting his phone and backpack beside him. For a moment he just breathed, reflecting on what had just happened. The warm, tempting shawarma was no longer on his mind as a danger had been avoided, and his relief replaced the craving. He ordered a small sandwich and some juice, choosing something simple but safe. The food arrived quickly, warm and fresh. He took a bite and felt immediate satisfaction. The bread was soft, the vegetables crisp, and the meat tender. It didn't have the strong spices of the shawarma, but it was wholesome, filling, and safe. Each bite reminded him that small choices mattered. The warmth of the meal filled not just his stomach, but also a sense of security that he hadn't realized he needed earlier. As he ate, he pulled out his phone again, thinking about sharing the story. He wanted his friends to know what had almost happened, not to scare them, but to teach them the lesson he had learned. He typed a message to Kamau, "Hey man. You won't believe what almost happened today. I nearly ate some bad meat from a street vendor and could have gotten really sick. Binta warned me just in time." Kamau's reply was almost immediate. "Seriously? You mean you almost got food poisoning? Wow, good thing you didn't eat it." Jalil typed back, "Exactly. One small decision saved me a lot of trouble. Made me realize we need to be careful sometimes, even when something looks perfect. As he shared the story, he felt a sense of pride. It wasn't just about avoiding illness, it was about awareness, caution, and gratitude. He realized that life often presented these small moments where decisions mattered more than they seemed at the time. A small pause, a warning heeding, a moment of observation, it could save someone from pain or worse. While finishing his meal, Jalil thought again about Binta. He wondered how many times she had cared enough to speak up for someone else. Her courage had been quiet but powerful. It didn't require applause or recognition. She had acted because she cared. And that action had saved him. Jalil felt inspired by that thought. Perhaps he thought he could do the same for someone else one day, notice, act, and speak up. He finished his sandwich and juice and felt full, satisfied, and surprisingly calm. The craving for the shawarma had faded completely. He realized that food was more than just flavor or hunger, it was also about safety and choice. Eating something unsafe could be dangerous, and avoiding it didn't make him weak, it made him smart and responsible. After leaving the cafe, Jalil continued walking through the streets, reflecting on the lessons he had learned. He noticed the vendors, the hustle, and the tempting smells from street food stalls. He smiled quietly to himself, remembering how tempting the shawarma had been earlier. But he also felt confident in his decision to step back, listen to a warning, and prioritize safety over hunger. He passed a few people eating street food and thought about how easy it could be to ignore warnings, to trust appearances, and to follow desire rather than reason. He remembered the news alert he had read on his phone and the image of contaminated meat sitting in the sun. The thought made him shiver slightly, but it also reminded him how lucky he had been. Jalil thought about sharing the story with his family later. His younger siblings often ran around without paying attention to small dangers. Maybe telling them what had happened could help them be more careful too. He realized that lessons weren't just for oneself, they could be shared, multiplied, and passed on to help others avoid harm. As he walked, Jalil's mind wandered to school and the rest of his day. He had classes to attend, assignments to finish, and plans for the evening. But none of that seemed urgent compared to what he had just experienced. The small decision he had made, listening, pausing, observing, and then choosing safety, had saved him from hours of sickness and discomfort. That realization filled him with a sense of responsibility and maturity. He smiled again, thinking about Kamau's teasing earlier. Kamau had shouted across the street, urging him to eat the shawarma, to give in to temptation. Jalil chuckled quietly. He knew Kamau hadn't understood the full picture. It wasn't about courage or fun anymore, it was about awareness and caution. And in that moment, Jalil felt stronger than he had in a long time. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm glow on the streets. Jalil continued walking, the city alive with activity around him. Children played, vendors shouted, and the smell of street food still floated in the air. But Jalil felt a difference inside himself. He wasn't drawn blindly to temptation anymore. He had learned that awareness and thoughtfulness mattered more than immediate gratification. He passed the shawarma stand one last time, glancing at the vendor who was busy preparing wraps for other customers. Jalil smiled faintly, knowing he had made the right choice. The smell of the meat was still rich and inviting, but it no longer had power over him. He felt a quiet pride, knowing he had acted responsibly when it mattered. Later that day he shared the story with a few friends during a break. They listened intently, some laughing at the near mishap, others nodding seriously at the lesson. Jalil explained how Binta had warned him, how the meat looked off, and how a local alert confirmed the contamination. His friends were impressed, and a few admitted they had ignored similar warnings before. Jalil felt satisfied. He realized that small stories could teach big lessons. He had learned the importance of paying attention, of listening to warnings, and of making thoughtful choices. And now, sharing the story with friends made the lesson even stronger, extending the safety and awareness to others. As evening approached, Jalil walked home with a sense of calm. His hunger was satisfied, but more importantly, he felt safe and grateful. He thought about how fragile safety could be and how easily a simple decision could prevent harm. One moment of awareness, one act of caution, and one choice to listen had changed the course of his day. By the time he reached home, Jalil felt a sense of completeness. He had survived a small but important test, learned a valuable lesson, and experienced the power of gratitude and awareness. He knew that life would always present temptations, risks, and moments of uncertainty. But now he felt equipped to face them carefully, responsibly, and with mindfulness. That night, as he recounted the story to his family over dinner, he emphasized the lesson. Small decisions mattered, listening to warnings could save lives, and acting with awareness was more important than giving in to immediate desire. His siblings listened intently, and his parents nodded with approval. Jalil went to bed that night with a sense of peace. The day had been busy, challenging and full of temptation, yet it had ended safely. He realized that even small encounters, like the one with Binta, could have a huge impact. Life was full of these moments, and learning from them was what made people stronger, wiser and more careful. As he drifted off to sleep, he thought about the warmth of the cafe sandwich, the relief he had felt, and the gratitude he had for Binta. That day he had learned something important. That sometimes listening, observing and making a small, thoughtful choice could save you from trouble, illness, or worse. And in the grand scheme of things, those small choices were the ones that truly mattered. Jalil smiled quietly in the dark, grateful for the lesson and ready to face the next day with more awareness, caution, and wisdom. That day, a simple choice had saved him, and that realization would stay with him for a long time. He passed the shawarma stand one last time, glancing at the vendor who was busy preparing wraps for other customers. Jalil smiled faintly, knowing he had made the right choice. The smell of the meat was still rich and inviting, but it no longer had power over him. He felt a quiet pride, knowing he had acted responsibly when it mattered. Later that day he shared the story with a few friends during a break. They listened intently, some laughing at the near mishap, others nodding seriously at the lesson. Jalil explained how Binta had warned him, how the meat looked off, and how a local alert confirmed the contamination. His friends were impressed, and a few admitted they had ignored similar warnings before. Jalil felt satisfied. He realized that small stories could teach big lessons. He had learned the importance of paying attention, of listening to warnings, and of making thoughtful choices. And now, sharing the story with friends made the lesson even stronger, extending the safety and awareness to others. As evening approached, Jalil walked home with a sense of calm. His hunger was satisfied, but more importantly, he felt safe and grateful. He thought about how fragile safety could be and how easily a simple decision could prevent harm. One moment of awareness, one act of caution, and one choice to listen had changed the course of his day. By the time he reached home, Jalil felt a sense of completeness. He had survived a small but important test, learned a valuable lesson, and experienced the power of gratitude and awareness. He knew that life would always present temptations, risks, and moments of uncertainty. But now he felt equipped to face them carefully, responsibly, and with mindfulness. That night, as he recounted the story to his family over dinner, he emphasized the lesson. Small decisions mattered, listening to warnings could save lives, and acting with awareness was more important than giving in to immediate desire. His siblings listened intently, and his parents nodded with approval. Jalil went to bed that night with a sense of peace. The day had been busy, challenging, and full of temptation, yet it had ended safely. He realized that even small encounters, like the one with Binta, could have a huge impact. Life was full of these moments, and learning from them was what made people stronger, wiser, and more careful. As he drifted off to sleep, he thought about the warmth of the cafe sandwich, the relief he had felt, and the gratitude he had for Binta. That day he had learned something important. That sometimes listening, observing, and making a small, thoughtful choice could save you from trouble, illness, or worse. And in the grand scheme of things, those small choices were the ones that truly mattered. Jalil smiled quietly in the dark, grateful for the lesson and ready to face the next day with more awareness, caution, and wisdom. That day, a simple choice had saved him, and that realization would stay with him for a long time.